Hi, we're happy to have everyone joining us today for the second in our mentoring series. It does take a minute or two for everyone to file in from the waiting room. So we'll just go over a couple housekeeping items. This is Aspen Family Business Group webinar. Happy to have you with us. We are going to be using the Q&A feature in this webinar, not the chat. We would love for it to be as engaging and interactive as possible. We know we're a little bit limited with this format, but please use the Q&A as a way to ask questions, make comments, because we would love to hear your questions and what you have to say. You can choose to be anonymous if you want in the Q&A, so please take advantage of that if that's appealing to you. And with that, I think we're ready to get started. Donnel and I did the first part of the mentoring series. We did a webinar in November, and we covered some of the basics of a mentoring relationship, some of the specific needs that we've discovered exist in family businesses, specific mentoring needs. Those are operational, legacy, and interpersonal. We're not going to spend a lot of time on that in this webinar, but we are going to give a quick review of some of the aspects of the relationship for the mentor and the mentee and attributes they bring to the relationship. And we're going to really be focused more on developing a program for you in your family business or for others. So, with that, we're going to get started and hand it over to Donnel. I have Donnel with me. Sorry, Donnel, Director of Innovation. I'm Shelley Taylor, Executive Director of the Aspen Family Business Group, and Donnel is our Director of Innovation.
Thanks, Shelley. So when we start thinking about any kind of a phenomena that we're talking about, whether it's mentoring or something else, a good starting point is always making sure that everyone shares the same understanding of what it is that we're discussing. And in the case of mentoring, the key here is thinking about mentoring as a practice that is comprehensive and it's like has the role of the mentor and the mentee is multifaceted, and it can include sponsorship, coaching, protection, which is looking out for your mentee in an organization, giving them opportunities to benefit from perhaps your status and prestige in terms of your work that you're doing or your industry, and giving them assignments that really challenge them and give them an opportunity to rise to the occasion, so to speak. There's also some of the things that happen in a way that go beyond other types of relationships, such as role modeling, acceptance, offering counsel, and this ever evolving deeper relationship. And when I think about some of the most impactful mentoring relationships that I've had personally in my life, very often the outcome of those mentoring relationships far exceeds anything that we could have ever imagined capturing in goals in the beginning. And so the key to remember is that mentoring is not a one-dimensional relationship. Okay, it's if someone is being, a friend, a coach, a teacher, those are all things that can add a great deal of value to a person's life. But the critical piece of mentoring is that it is an expansive relationship that goes and touches into almost every aspect of a person's life.
So here's a little bit more review here when we talk about what attributes effective mentors and mentees can bring to the relationship. We're listed here. I don't need to read them all to you, but just a, quick show of hands or something in the Q&A. Have you either seen some of these attributes supporting a relationship, either that you've been involved in or you're aware of, or maybe the lack of these not supporting a relationship? We would love to hear from you if you could put something in the Q&A and tell us your experience. But you will see that both of these, on both sides of the page here, there needs to be a commitment on both of these. I mean, we talk a little bit more about that in the relationships themselves, but an effective mentee, an effective mentor has to really be interested in doing the work on both sides.
Yeah, there's very much a reciprocal thing going on, right, Shelley?
Yes, absolutely. And you see it more here also in the responsibilities and the expectations. So these are also attributes that help further the relationship, right? So on the one hand, it's how can you be effective as a mentor? How can you be effective as a mentee? And here we're looking at what happens within those sessions and what happens within the relationship. We're able to create some overlap here because there are some that fall on both sides into both the mentor and the mentees roles. And we do have a comment in the Q&A. Thank you for that. This is wonderful, and that's what we expect. This person shares that they've had several significant mentors that made a big difference in their life and careers trajectory, and are now trying to give back to others in the same way. And that's one of our. I think we have that in some of our materials, Donnel. I remember putting that in about paying it forward or however you want to refer to it, but be willing and interested in giving back also. So thank you for that.
So when we start thinking about what else is needed, we think about this from a few different perspectives. And, one of the things that I've noticed over the years is in the relationships that tend to struggle the most or not be successful, if there tends to be a lack of follow through for either a mentee or a mentor. And the most common way that it shows itself is that meetings start getting missed and nobody comes back around to make sure that they're happening and getting rescheduled. And so it starts in small ways like that, that builds into a lack of accountability. And in order for things to be successful, both the mentor and the mentee have to take responsibility for those moments and make sure that things keep happening. And beyond just the actual mentoring relationship that's focusing on exchanging learning and helping a person to develop relative to an organization or a particular field, one of the things that really works to strengthen the relationship over time is having things that happen where the people in the relationship start to get to know each other in ways that exceeds that sort of context of professionalism. And so finding commonalities and interests or trying to understand each other's values and, hopes for their lives are ways to strengthen the relationship that helps to make things even more transparent as time goes on. And another part that really helps with these things when we think about it in terms of a family business or an organization is having other support. And other support can sometimes be other stakeholders. It can be other people in a network. It can be people who are in your admin team who help to make sure that there are things getting scheduled and that the resources needed are available. There's also things that help to keep this going forward that include collecting feedback, making sure that there are assessments being arranged and tracked to monitor how the relationship is going, and looking for other ways to support professional development, including reaching out to the community that exists between the mentor and the mentee.
Yeah, thanks, Danelle. We're going to get to a lot of those other things that help support and strengthen the relationship. But I want to pick up on one of the comments you made about what happens in the relationship and how there are goals for maybe the mentee has specific goals, and then the mentor might pick up on some things that might help the mentee. But when the relationship can move beyond what was, sort of predetermined or set out, the plan that was set out at the beginning, but when it can move beyond that and develop into a relationship of its own, that's when you really find the satisfying and the gratifying relationships that carry on sometimes for years, between people and become friendships. Maybe they move past the mentoring phase because it was a particular time in someone's life, but that the relationships continue on. So that's very valuable when that can happen.
Yeah, Shelley, you're absolutely spot on there. If we think about this from an academic perspective, there really are sort of developmental trajectories within mentoring relationships that do tend to evolve to a point where there is a friendship that may be the ultimate landing space, and a shared collaboration in learning that enters into entirely unforeseen aspects of life and the world. It's pretty amazing.
Right. And people need to develop the trust over time. They develop the trust and the comfort level with each other to move into those other realms. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay. So now we're going to get into the actual program design itself and how do you create a structure and what is involved in all of that. So, something to think about even before you get into all this is, do we have a goal? Is this project related? Is this for a particular position that someone has in the business? Is it for some other aspect of someone's life? Maybe it's, as we talk about the interpersonal in our three mentoring needs in family business. So is it a particular goal? Are we trying to achieve something specific? So think about that, because that will help you with the program design, and I'll give you some specifics to make that more clear. So this is going to be these elements of a program design are going to be important no matter what your goals are. You're going to want to do these things, but they might change. They differ depending on what those goals are. So assigning mentors, and we're going to talk about this a little bit, just from the so there are several different ways to assign mentors, right? You might have a fixed group of people that are relevant to this project or to this goal. So then you choose from among those. Or it might be much broader. And in that case, you are looking beyond the sort of the usual suspects, right? It could be someone in your family or someone in your business, but you might want to cast a wider net. And that would involve an approach that we call the network approach to mentoring, or the network approach to finding mentors. And we're actually going to give you, as a takeaway, one of our toolkits that we've developed that really helps you assess your network to see where there might be people. And it might not just be the mentees network, it can be someone else in your family system or in the business system, tapping into as many resources as possible. And that's where having the goals for the program also help you at the outset too. So you know what you're looking for, what kind of support is needed. So that's one, right? You might have a fixed set of potential mentor. You might have a mentoring pool, so a pool of potential mentors, or you might take the network approach. Now, when we say establish the meeting schedule, this is really when it's goal specific. So I'll touch on what the example is going to be. And this is from my experience. I chaired the family council for our family's third and fourth generation business. I'm a married in, and we have a board with independent directors, majority of independents, and we were bringing on fourth generation family members as a learning program. We called it the Associate Advisor Program, and there was a mentoring component to that. So I'll get a little bit more into that. In that case, we had board meetings. We had quarterly board meetings. So the schedule that we wanted to start with, and that could be modified as it went, but we wanted to start with a quarterly schedule at least for the mentor and the mentee to be meeting. The mentee was this fourth generation family member who was learning, the mentor being one of the independent directors on the board. So that's what we mean by the meeting schedule. Measuring progress, and we're going to get into this in more detail. This is about having some metrics, some assessments, self assessments, ways to see, are our objectives being met? Are our goals being met? Is this a good match? Are we paired well? And then the accountability structure also fits into that as well. So are we meeting these metrics? Is somebody helping that support personnel as we mentor it? Are they sort of checking in to make sure that things are working? And having these things in place really helps if you might not have the best mentor mentee fit for whatever reason. This gives everyone a way to stop and reboot without there being an issue, instead of just dropping off and never meeting, never reaching out, have a way to say, maybe this isn't the best fit, or maybe this isn't working, and then try again, find a new mentor. And so the accountability helps then check in at regular intervals with people. And so now, I want to talk a little bit about the program that we did establish at our family business. And as I said, we had quarterly meetings. Now, the idea was have a meeting, get the materials for the board meeting, have a chance to review them, and then have the mentee check in with the mentor. And as we touched on a little bit earlier, it's really the mentee's responsibility to do that reach out. But you might have, if you have a mentor who really cares about the relationship and really wants to bring the mentee along, it's okay to sometimes do that reaching out and scheduling. But you don't want that to sort of become the pattern. You want really the mentee to understand that this is their responsibility to move it forward. So checking in prior to a meeting, in our case, at our business, it was really nice because these independent directors took it so seriously, really wanted to develop these rising generation people. So they would sit together at the board meetings actually and, have the opportunity to write a small note and find out, is this question, the mentee can say, "Well, I have this question," or they might discuss it at a break. And the mentor would say, "That's an appropriate question. Go ahead and ask it," or guide them and say, "You know what? That's really a better one to do offline," or I really had that question too, so really help coach them and encourage them when it's appropriate to speak up. And then also meeting schedule to check in after the meeting as well and have a little debrief. What did you not understand? What was helpful to you? How can we do it differently in the future? And then they were also able to check in between meetings. The program sets a framework, but then clearly within that relationship, each of the parties has the opportunity to enhance it as well. We did have some assessment forms that I actually orchestrated the program. So I was the administrator and I would send out these assessments and self assessments for both the mentors and mentees to fill out. And then we would collate them midway through the program and at the end just to measure the progress and how the mentees were doing. And, there was always an opportunity for someone to confidentially share something that they might not want on the record, but they might want to talk about further. And so that really gives people the opportunity to dig into something where they might not otherwise feel there's a way to do so. So then I think that covers sort of our examples. I would love, if anyone has any specific questions, please throw them in the Q&A. And I do see that we have a
Yeah, there was
question
one that
here.
popped up.
Yeah.
Um, and Shelley, so the question is, how can a mentee properly show gratitude to their mentor? And is it common for mentors to have expectations about thank yous? What have what have you seen in your experience?
Yeah, and I think that's a really good question, and with the example I gave, the experiences really were across the board. I mean, I saw some people develop relationships where they were communicating more regularly in between meetings. And then I had some where the mentor told me that the mentee really didn't reach out or respond. And I think in this scenario, the people, because I witnessed this firsthand, I know that the mentors were so invested in the success of both the company overall, the board itself, and developing these rising generation people that for them, that was gratitude, that they could see the progress and they could experience that firsthand. And I just know that because I know the individuals involved and could sense that. And I got feedback, directly, about people saying how pleased they were with their mentees and how they were really developing. And so more generically, I think that's an excellent question. I would say, as to many things, it depends. And so in my case, there was not necessarily anything formal needed. Um, but I think it's a great idea for the mentees to really express their appreciation and their gratitude. And I think sharing the journey, I've heard people talk about how, if someone has made a difference in their lives, even not even to the level of mentoring, mark it on your calendar for 6 months or a year from now. Maybe it was even Donnel who told me that. And, send a note or, who does that, right? Send an email. Notes are more, have bigger impact, I think. So I think it's always good to express that. And those of you who've done some reading about that, there's been a lot about gratitude over the past few years. And I think that's a wonderful, it's wonderful to express gratitude. It makes us feel better. It makes the recipient feel better. So even just, I think that verbal acknowledgement is worth a lot.
Yeah, Shelley, I think from a very pragmatic standpoint, that adding the future date on a calendar and providing an update on maybe something that a mentor had helped you with, and letting them know where it's progressed, and letting them know that what they shared with you is still having an impact on their lives is really something quite remarkable. And I've been on both the receiving and giving end of that practice. And I think that can be really impactful.
Great. Thank you for that question.
Yeah, it was a great one.
Okay, to know.
So another part of the program is having meeting norms. And Shelley, I think you spoke to a lot of this with examples that you gave in the prior slide, but it's really ultimately the meeting norms are the expected behaviors that are the standards that you want to adhere to that keep things moving forward, make it possible for people to be transparent, to feel that they are committed to what the relationship is about. And ultimately, I think one of the key things here is that when you have all of these things together and you are reviewing what is happening in meetings at the end of them, you get people on the same page and there's clarity about what everybody's committing to. And so there's that book by Lencioni, Five Dysfunctions of the Team. One of five dysfunctions is failure to commit or something like this. And that is very much applicable to mentoring, is that if people don't take the time at the end of meetings to make sure that they are all in agreement about what was discussed and decided, then sometimes people can leave with different assumptions and go in different directions. And establishing meeting norms is a really fantastic way to help mitigate the potential for that to happen, and also to help make sure that there is ongoing momentum and accountability for the relationship.
Yeah, and I think and revisiting these, right? I mean, so it's good
Yeah,
to start out with them, but then check back in and say, are these still working for us? And do we have any challenges around these? Is there something we missed that we need to add in here?
absolutely. They're something that you can have different types of meeting norms, including norms that you hold almost as ground rules within the meeting. And those can be really excellent to revisit at the beginning, especially as the relationship is more in the forming stages, so that it's clear about what makes it easy to communicate with transparency.
And so part of setting up a program is if you have a specific project goal framework that this mentoring program is trying to address, you want to set goals beyond. So you're going to have these overarching goals, right? As I mentioned, developing board members, right? Learning, and actually I can talk about some of those. Part of it, I alluded to one, is boardroom behavior, but some of that others might be reading financials. So someone who gets the board book but does not have finance, accounting, math background might just gloss over. So the mentor can help the mentee say, well, what's important in a financial document? Do you need to understand every line item and every bit, or are there big picture? How do you view the big picture? What are the big numbers, the big items that you want to check so that you can assess how's the business doing and how do you measure that? And so the mentor can help the mentee with that. And so in the first item on the left of your screen, the mentee might know some of the things that he or she wants to learn about board meetings, right? So the board book, company structure, who reports at a meeting, all those kinds of things, boardroom dynamics. But then the mentor might up on some certain things that he or she feels that the mentee can really benefit from. So you can discuss that in that context. And then, it's collaborative and it evolves as the mentor is able to observe the mentee. other things might develop. As the mentee has attended several board meetings and now understands sort of the lay of the land, they might be ready to go the next level in. So these are evolving, but they should be discussed and upfront. And so everyone understands, yeah, these are some of the things that we're trying to achieve. And then also we can add to these things. And as we accomplish them or we feel we're making progress, we can add more. Janelle, do you have any to add on this?
Yeah, I think the idea of the goals being initiated by the mentee, that does sort of start the wheel turning, right? And then there's the opportunity for the wisdom and experience of the mentor to then insert itself. And I remember an example from an early mentoring relationship that I had a number of years ago where I had an idea of something that I wanted to accomplish professionally. And I was all on board for I am going to learn everything I can about this particular professional endeavor. And a mentor at the time suggested to me that I add into my goals picking a field that has nothing to do with what I was pursuing and trying to learn aspects of that at the same time. And she shared this idea with me to encourage creativity. Ultimately, the experience that I had by doing that, by having her suggest that other goal into my goals, was the thing that really cracked the code for what I was trying to work on and helped me to see some connections that I wouldn't have seen if I had just stayed dedicated to my own goals and direction. So it there's opportunity by the mentor coming into this and doing that to really expand a person's thinking, but also to then in turn expand what's possible in the relationship.
Yeah, thanks, Danelle. That's a nice perspective. And also, so we talked about goals for the relationship. Also, I wanted to mention that goals for each meeting, right? And so sometimes it can be you don't always have to have a tight agenda or everything super structured, but I think it's really great to have for the mentee to come in and the mentor also might have some goals for a particular meeting. I think that really helps move the relationship forward and helps the mentee with the progress. So, goals overall for the relationship, goals for the mentee, goals for a particular meeting, and then goals for progress and development, which aren't necessarily the same as what the goals would be for the bigger picture goals for the mentee, right? It might be, by 6 months from, goals for development could be by 6 months from now, I want to have mastered this part of the board book, using that as an example, right? And then by the following meeting, I want to really be able to just look at that snapshot look at the financials and view it as a snapshot instead of a page filled with so many numbers. So setting some timeline expectations can really be helpful as well.
And this one's assessment is something that has a couple different facets to it. And I think in the sense of mentoring program, there's assessment that takes place that is, psychometrics and psychological assessments, things around conflict, values, personality, derailers, and these kinds of things. But there's also the program level assessment and making sure that the participants in the program, the mentor and the mentee, are looking at themselves critically. And one of the questions that just popped up here is recommendations for assessments, psychometrics, or progress assessments. And do I have any recommendations? 100%. I absolutely love to see the TKI being used, which is a conflict style assessment.
That's the
And
Thomas Kilman.
there's different options for values, and on the aspenfamilybusiness.org site, there is an exercise there's a tool there that you can use to surface values and personality typing. I tend to lean into the Myers Briggs type 2. And so the type 2 goes beyond the four letters and gives you some that help to explain nuances why someone might have tested to be an I, but sees themselves as an E or struggles to see themselves as an I. I also find that if this relationship is being done amongst key stakeholders at higher levels, Hogan can be incredibly powerful. And depending on the relationship, it can be beneficial for the mentee to do these things or both the mentee and the mentor. It's a little bit depends on the context. But one of the other things that, when we go through and we're thinking about assessments in terms of progress, that's one of the tools that we're going to share with you as well from this webinar. And there's questions on there about how the mentor and mentee see themselves, how they see the other. And these can be great ways to track how things are progressing over time. And again, for the mentee and the mentor to be looking at their relationship, standing outside of it and saying, what's working for us? And where could we be doing more or better? Um, and someone was asking about the E versus the I and the Myers Briggs. It's extrovert, introvert in the Myers Briggs. And it basically reflects on where people get their energy from. Is it from social or from more sort of internal focus? Then the other thing that I really encourage with clients is to figure out some form of a dashboard that they can use for tracking. And there are a couple different ways to go at this, but I like to have something that is a in digital format, so in shared documents, and it has a place where you're capturing the assessments, where you're capturing the goals, and capturing goals in a long term, medium term, and near term. And so the long term is a 3 year, the medium term is a one, and the near term is anything from 90 days down to, something that needs to happen in a couple of weeks. And I believe that when you have these kinds of things that are being tracked in a dashboard, you're better able to monitor actual progress, which can be exciting for both parties to see when it's happening. And then another excellent practice, and I think we have so many options for this today with Zoom being able to record and transcribe things or other things, but to maintain a log of meeting notes, because again, it comes back to that thing of commitment is what are we committing to so that both the mentor and the mentee stay on the same page in terms of their pursuits related to the relationship. Shelley, would you add anything to that in terms of ways that you're thinking about assessment and the programs that you guys have in the family business or with clients of yours?
No, I think this is good and you've covered it really well. One thing I do want to note is this can sound like a lot. We're giving you all these things, how to set up a program, but the idea behind this, first of all, do what works for you and do what you have the manpower and the capacity for. And the idea, the impetus behind what Donnel and I have done, and we didn't give an intro on to this in this webinar we did back in November. Donnell and I did a lot of research on mentoring, and we developed a whole mentoring and family business program. We did this several years back, 2017, I think we started, which is crazy to think. So we did interviews and we data collecting and categorized it. And the idea was there are lots, mentoring big corporations, health systems, schools, right? Mentoring's a big buzzword now. When we started, it wasn't quite as much, but there's a lot of support in those larger structures. And so what we thought was it's so valuable and worthwhile and necessary everywhere. How can we support family businesses? And a piece of that was if you're all family in a family business and is uncle mentoring nephew or niece, and what gets in the way of that possibly or other relationships. So we cover a lot of that in the first webinar, and the recording of that is on our website, as well as a narrative which will be up very soon so you can read it instead of watching if that's your preference. But the point is that there's a lot, to have a structure and to do all these things might feel overwhelming, but do the part that works, right? If it can just be sort of the goal setting or the mentor mentee matchmaking and, taking the network approach or doing some assessments, right? So figure out what's going to work for you and don't feel like, wow, it's too much. I can't do any of it.
Shelley, that's an excellent point, and I'm glad you raised that because when I'm throwing out all this list of assessments, I think there's a time and a place for that level of exploration, and it's not universally true for all. And if folks on this webinar are trying to think of a good starting point, I would encourage you to go to aspenfamilybusiness.org and look up the values exercise. And that can be a fantastic way to start any mentoring relationship is to have the mentee and the mentor, do that exercise together and have discussion about it because values really do lay the foundation for just about everything else that we do. And having a mentor and mentee be clear about where they align and where they might be possibly different can spark all sorts of amazing collaborative learning, discussion, and opportunity.
Yeah, and that's called Values Unfolding, and that's from work that Ann Dapis, I think is how it's pronounced, Dapice, work that she did. And also brings up, then we'll move on, but a really other interesting point is that in that mentoring relationship, you can bring in other activities and bring in other things which are so valuable for both parties in that relationship and for the growth and personal development for both of you as a team and as individuals. So that's great idea, Donnel.
Thanks, Shelley. And thinking about being successful, there's a list of things here, and one of the core principles that goes with the mentoring relationship, like when you look back at some of the historical origins of learning relationships, it can often be traced back into the time of like ancient Greece, and one of the defining principles that people lived with culturally in that time was a concept called charis, and it's charis. And what that means is literally reciprocal favor. And it speaks about the nature of of exchange between people and how critical that is for people to be successful. All of these things that are on this list are different ways that that concept is reflected. And a lot of the ultimate success of a mentor and mentee relationship is their capacity to how effectively they can learn together. And coming into a mentoring relationship from the perspective of a mentee, there's tremendous learning opportunity. And there's also the same potential for tremendous learning coming in from the perspective of a mentor. So when I think about being successful, at the end of the day, you can ask yourself, am I learning something? And that can be, again, another topic that could be brought up in a mentoring session. What are we learning?
And I
Could be,
think, yeah,
yeah,
and it's a great point about, and we've touched on it a couple times already, what the mentor gets out of the relationship. But I think it's a really good message and way to measure how things are going because I feel if it's really symbiotic in a positive way and both parties are benefiting, everyone feels that. You feel the energy, it progresses the relationship in a different kind of way.
absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay, so wrapping up this section, and we have one more section in the webinar. So setting yourself up, right? And this is pretty much a review of what we've covered, but understanding who's doing what we're trying to accomplish, looking for, checking out your network and really maximizing those who are already part of your network, but you might not have realized, and where you might need to expand your network. And that can be based on some of the goals that you have and some of the needs that are identified. Does everyone understand the commitments? Do you have support, necessary support, administrative support? And when I say the commitments, if you're going to have someone in your organization or someone else in your family, in our case, it was a family council initiative, is that person all in and ready to support what's going on? And then using those tools, those assessments that we talked about and professional development, it's not just something to be checked off the box. It's a mindset. It's, do we really want to get to this new place? And maybe we don't even know where that place is, like in Donnell's situation with the story that he shared. And then thinking about, are we following a lot of the other family business best practices that, the boards of directors, independence, values, shared vision, all those things that we have some of that. We have some of it. We have a lot of it on our on our website. So Danelle and I have also developed 7 keys to mentoring success. And so we will be distributing that along with the webinar and the other toolkits that we shared. But ways to assess, you know, here we are assessing, but where you are even before you get started or where you might need to put a little more energy or thought or time. Anything to add here, Danelle?
I think, yeah, again, I think it's just really coming down to is the relationship progressing, and all these things kind of help to support the potential for that to happen. So, one of the big challenges for families in business historically has been how do we transfer and how do we capture and transfer institutional or family knowledge in really meaningful ways. And mentoring has been one way to go at that. When we think about the idea, when Shelley and I have looked at mentoring relationships in different families and different businesses, like many things in family business, it seems obvious that wouldn't it be great if everyone was learning from each other? But there are things that get in the way of that, even with all the best intentions. And one of the most common barriers to that happening is that oftentimes we hear from mentees issues related to vulnerability. Specifically, here they are trying to rise through an organization, elevate themselves in the eyes of the senior generation, or whether that's family or non-family leadership. And there's a tremendous risk for asking questions, or tremendous risk in asking questions that they may feel they should already know the answer to. And it can sometimes lead to the questions not being asked by mentees. When Shelley and I were doing research on this, we heard from at least one mentee that the most valuable conversations that they had were in informal settings where they felt like they could be at ease. So vulnerability is a major challenge. The other thing that often comes up as a major challenge is making time to adequately prepare for sessions when there's so much else going on. And then the third major issue again goes to how do we have a meaningful way to capture knowledge that is gained in sessions. And I think of this in 2 ways. There's the knowledge that is sort of being formulated or shared in the sessions relative to the mentor and mentee, but there's also that knowledge relative to the broader organization and the family. So if you don't mind going to the next slide. So with the current technologies available, AI related, it's created an opportunity for us to approach things a little differently that I believe helps to mitigate some of these issues a bit. And it starts with building a knowledge base. And basically, what I mean here is that the mentor and mentee get really clear about what areas need to be captured. And so, if you have a father and a son in a business and they're working on trying to have an effective mentoring relationship, one of the starting points can be a brainstorming session on what does the dad do that if he was gone tomorrow would need to be picked up by someone in his absence. Once you have those key knowledge areas identified, then you start to develop questions that you use to be able to interview the father on that particular topic area. AI can do wonders for generating interviews. You can share those questions. The mentee would do this and then share those back with the mentor and say, am I missing any questions relative to this topic? And then you conduct the interviews and you capture them in transcripts and you start building a knowledge base. And the knowledge base piece here from a technical standpoint, there is a spectrum of how this can look. At one end, there's a $100,000 investment, and that's not most of us. And at the other end, it's simply taking those transcripts and finding an AI tool that is secure and has confidentiality for your data and entering those transcripts into that particular tool and using the one of the old ones that we were using in the past was Humata. And you can have a conversation with a PDF. And Shelley, if you can go to the next slide. And so the way that you do this is you now have, through those interviews, you're developing a virtual company version of the company leader's knowledge where the mentee can begin querying against that and asking questions before going to a mentoring session, some of which may be things that they don't necessarily feel comfortable asking because of the vulnerability factor, and getting responses back. And it may end up being that they no longer need to ask those questions. But the most effective way I see this being done is if the mentee starts querying against the database that they created and then sharing what they got back with their mentor and having them review it, and then they discuss it during the session, it can be an amazing way of turbocharging the learning in the relationship. And it also creates an ongoing record of the leader's knowledge that can be captured and considered for use in later times related to other topic areas that may go beyond the scope of the mentoring relationship.
Yeah, I see this as super valuable. Donnel, I would like for you to share with everyone. Last month, Donnel did a webinar. Actually, we were on it together. AI readiness and talking about some of the safeguards, some of the tools and ways to leverage AI, but also safeguards. So if you could touch on that briefly here, Donnel, that'd be great.
Absolutely. I think the key here is for the first time in my life, I'm reading the terms and conditions on anything that I am signing up for. And I encourage others to do the same, to make sure that there are options for you to secure your data, that it's not being shared with other vendors related to the particular platform you're using. Also, with ChatGPT being an example, when you go to data usage, when you first sign up, you can click into your settings and you can turn off data sharing. And I know that's true in some other platforms as well. For the time being, until you know for sure that the platform you're using is secure, I would not put anything that is the realm of highly confidential or
Or
intellectual
proprietary, right?
proprietary
Yeah.
into that. But in the last 2 months, I've had conversations with two different emerging businesses that are looking at ways to provide services to capture this exact kind of thing. And so it's very much on our near horizon and very much a way of addressing an age old issue or question of how do we preserve the knowledge of our family business. And I believe that this is going to be something that is going to be quite impactful.
I think I could see this in other ways, right? Other legacy areas for families, history, family history, business history, not just the current knowledge or the tacit knowledge that we refer to, which is sometimes hard to
Absolutely.
capture. Yeah,
Absolutely.
great.
So, yeah, do we have any questions?
I think that's all the content we have, but I do want to let you know, those of you who have attended our webinars before know that we will be sending out this recording. It's ready within a week, so either by the end of this week or definitely by Monday or Tuesday of next week. And at the same time, you will get links to these toolkits that we mentioned. So we have the 7 keys to successful family business mentoring. And so those are ways to assess where you are and what you might need to look at, work on, develop. We have the network assessment tool, and I think we call it something else, but network's definitely in the name, but it's a way to sort of figure out, and it's quite thorough. I mean, it's a way to really go through who do I know, what are their attributes, what do I need, who do I know, and then making lists and really filling in numbers. So, really super helpful there. And then also examples of those assessments and self assessments once you're in a mentoring relationship that you can use as both mentor and mentee. Um, and thank you, Zachary, for that comment. And any final words, Donnel? We have a coffee later this month, Coffee with Leslie. Those are interactive. We get to see all the squares on the screen. So would love to see some of you there. We engage in great dialogue and sharing among the attendees and resources from Aspen Family Business Group, predominantly Leslie Dashu, but others of us join as well. And then next month we'll be talking about energy in your family business and balancing well we call the family scorecard, but we're going to be talking about how do you move through that cycle, how do you keep the family engaged and explore the learning and all the things that a family can do together. So with
Yeah, no,
that,
Sam, our family business dedicated AI, is also trained on a lot of this mentoring information that we've shared with you today. And so that is an excellent resource, familybusiness.ai, to tap into if you're working on putting together a plan to formally start some mentoring in your own family business.
wonderful to have you all here today, and thank you for joining us. Hope to see you next time. Thanks.